I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for September 13th, 2021. As you are able, if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll of the members?
Ms. Hoppy.
Present.
Ms. Hutchinson.
Present.
Mr. Urban.
Present.
Ms. Hulteen.
Present.
Ms. Weaver.
Here.
Mr. Stites.
Present.
Ms. Dozeman.
Here.
Ms. Nosler-Beck.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, all 8 members of council are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Councilors, in your packet tonight, you have the City Council meeting minutes of August the 23rd, 2021. If there are no objections or corrections, we will let those stand as noted. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one small correction for the clerk. The date listed in the minutes for the Harvest Festival is October 15th, and the date is actually October 16th. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we will let the minutes stand as corrected. If there are no changes to our agenda, we will approve the agenda as presented. So ordered. And we have 2 proclamations this evening, and let's go to the podium. Thank you. I'm good. We're good on the audio. I'm pleased to read a proclamation in support of National Hispanic Heritage Month, and I'm happy to be joined with Ms. Alvina Velasquez, who is a community member, a business owner in Wheat Ridge, and serves on our Equity and Diversity Task Force. So thank you for being here. National Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15th to October 15th, 2021. Whereas Hispanic Americans have contributed greatly to our nation in all areas, including science, art, music, sports, education, and public service, and have bravely served their country in large numbers in times of peace, war, and in every way throughout our nation's history. And whereas in 1968, Congress authorized President Lyndon Baines Johnson to proclaim National Hispanic Heritage Week, and this observance was expanded in 1988 to a month-long celebration. And whereas during this month, Americans celebrate the traditions, ancestry, and unique experiences of those who trace their family background to Spain and Latin American countries. And whereas 21% of Wheat Ridge residents identify as Hispanic or Latino. And whereas, throughout our history, Hispanic Americans have enriched the American way of life, and we recognize the millions of Hispanic Americans whose love of family, hard work, and community have helped unite us as a nation. And whereas, accomplishments made by the Hispanic Americans serve as an inspiration to all those who seek freedom, opportunity, and a new beginning for themselves and their children. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Wheat Ridge Mayor and City Council wish to recognize September 15th to October 15th, 2021 as National Hispanic Heritage Month and encourage residents of Wheat Ridge to celebrate the cultural, professional, educational, and civic contributions of the Hispanic community. Dated this 13th day of September 2021. Mayor Bud Starker.
Esteemed Mayor and Councilors, my name is Alvina Vasquez. I'm a Wheat Ridge resident. I live here and work here. Thank you for the invitation to speak and address the community today. It's a privilege to stand before you. It is a privilege to stand before you, and it's a privilege that everybody in our community has, but many are fearful to do so. And that's why it's important for me to say what I'm about to say. What does representing your district and this town and this city mean to you? I hope it represents that you're representing people who speak in front of you every day, and people who are working 2 jobs and can't make it in, people who are finding it hard to find housing or work. I hope it means representing people who are unhoused, people who are currently or just out of the justice system, and families with mixed immigration status. As administrators and as community members, I implore us to look deeper, to reach out more, to open more doors for all community members. When we proclaim Hispanic Heritage Month, I hope that today and moving forward, we're also proclaiming that we will serve Latino families in our community to the best of our ability. I hope we are proclaiming that Latino families in Wheat Ridge will receive an equitable response to their needs. Equitable means meeting them where they're at without assumptions about who they are or what they represent. We need to go beyond proclamations and words of recognition, open our eyes and ears to the subtle ways that discrimination exists in our codes, ordinances, and policing. Thank you for the proclamation and recognition, but it's time for us to work a little bit harder. With the current economic, housing, and political climate, we need to do a little bit more. I currently sit on the Race and Equity Task Force, and I thank you all for bringing a lot of smart people together to address broad issues. But let's think about what's happening day to day, what's going on, the little things that are easily ignored. So let's go deeper. Let's address what's happening a little bit further. Let's do a little bit extra to hear from folks that can't be here every week. There's a lot of people who carry the burden of multiple generations of discrimination and oppression, and they have a voice here too. I applaud your dedication, your personal time that you spend doing this. I know it's a lot. I know it's a huge burden, so I appreciate it. But we as a community have to work together. And I'm here to work with you all and the community to make sure that there is a voice for those who feel voiceless. And we're making Wheat Ridge an inclusive and thriving community for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next proclamation is in support of the Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth 20th anniversary year. And I would like to invite Diane Hagerman, who is the Dean of the Arvada campus of the Red Rocks Community College, and Mike Litzow, who's a past president of RSA. Thank you for joining us. Whereas Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth was founded in 2001 by Dwayne Yusey and Bill Johnson, Arvada residents, and Diane Hageman, Dean of the Arvada campus of Red Rocks Community College. And whereas the mission of this volunteer-driven organization is to facilitate the ongoing recognition, educational, and leadership opportunities for Arvada and Wheat Ridge youth who have overcome adversity. And whereas the purpose of this organization is to ensure that youth who have overcome adversity receive public recognition and opportunities to help them achieve their potential. And whereas from 2001 to 2021, a total of 1,538 youth from Arvada and Wheat Ridge communities have been recognized by this organization in annual ceremonies, have been issued certificates of recognition, and had their names placed in the United States Congressional Record. And whereas from 2001 to 2021, a total of 401 of the recognized youth have been awarded scholarships to Red Rocks Community College. And whereas Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth will be celebrating its 20 years of existence and the many contributions it has made to the betterment of Arvada and Wheat Ridge in a celebratory event at the Community Room at Red Rocks Community College in Lakewood on October 21st, 2021, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Now therefore be it resolved that the Wheat Ridge Mayor and City Council wish to recognize Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth to honor its founders and the volunteers from 20 community organizations who have sustained this organization for 2 decades, and to congratulate the young people who have become confident members and leaders of our community because of this unique and special program. In witness thereof, on this 13th day of September 2021, Bud Starker, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff, guests in the City of Wheat Ridge. Joining me tonight is Mike Litzow, former chair of Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth. You may have just been slipped a small brochure into your packet. Thank you for doing that this evening. And I wanted to just bring it to your attention for just a few moments. If you look inside of that, you will see a symbol for our Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth. And I wanted to just talk about that briefly because it represents the 5 stars or the 5 partnership organizations that without all of them, we would not be in existence tonight. And so again, I wanted to point out that the 5 stars represent the cities of Arvada and Wheat Ridge, who have played a very active role in Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth, Jefferson County Public Schools, the service clubs of Wheat Ridge and Arvada, community organizations, Red Rocks Community College. All of those have worked tirelessly together to recognize our youth. These youth that we have recognized over the last 20 years have been not your students who have excelled, you wouldn't be perceived as excelling, but rather those who have extreme adversities and challenges that they've had to overcome. And we felt that this organization, by affording scholarships and mentoring and nurturing, can help these students become individuals who are very successful. And I wanted to just point out for a quick moment that several people have been very key from the cities of Wheat Ridge. And I just wanted to start out recognizing Gretchen Cerveny and Carl Cerveny, who were instrumental in actually when we started the organization. And without Gretchen's help and support, we wouldn't be here today. And Carl was actually a Wheat Ridge Optimist member, and he provided a lot of great advice and help for us along the way. Kurt Gilmore, who many of you also may recognize, was a strong founding supporter and a member of Wheat Ridge Rotary. I also want to acknowledge the city of Wheat Ridge because our first ceremony on February 28th, 2002, where we recognized 12 individuals that evening, was held at the Wheat Ridge Rec Center. So thank you very much. And then finally, I also want to recognize former Police Chief Dan Brennan, who also was an active service club member. He emceed a number of our events and recognition ceremonies and was a strong supporter of the organization. And finally, we would also like to invite you to the 20th anniversary celebration that will be held, as mentioned before, on October 21st, 2021 in the community room at Red Rocks Community College. So thank you again for your support and honoring of our youth from the cities of Wheat Ridge and Arvada. Thank you.
Okay, we are now at our public's right to speak. Members of the public may speak on any matter that is not on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes under the public's right to speak. When I call your name, if you would come up to the podium and please introduce yourself, give us your first name and last name. If you'd please spell your last name for the record and give us your address, then the clerk will turn on the buttons when you have. We've got the green light comes on when the speaker commences, and the green light will flash when you have 30 seconds remaining. The yellow light comes on at 15 seconds, and when the red light comes on, your time is expired. And if you would please wrap up your comments. We will also be taking a comment. We have a special study session right after this meeting, and so we will be taking comments on the study session item at this time also. So first we will go to our public's right to speak, and I don't have anyone signed up to speak on my list, but if there's anyone who is here that is not signed up to speak and would like to speak, now is the opportunity to do so. Please come forward, and I'll ask our clerk if we have anyone on the Zoom format who has raised their hands and would like to speak.
I do not see any hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and I don't see anyone stepping forward to speak under public's right to speak, so I would like to go to our study session public speaking opportunity, and I have Mr. Jesse Hill signed up to speak. Mr. Hill.
Good evening. Good evening, Council. Name's Jesse Hill, 2995 Chase Street. I own 3 affordable housing units in Wheat Ridge and Denver, and I'm excited to see Council focusing on affordable housing. I do ask, though, that you do your best to define what in the study session minutes, the quote, affordable housing, and really try to get more focused on that and avoid the generic if you can. Specifically towards staff and consultants, because it'll help them get the goals and communicate what we're really intending out there. That might mean, housing affordability, federally defined at 30% out there, or the stock of houses in Wheat Ridge that does that. Subsidized housing, exclusionary housing, like age or income housing, rent controls, or market-based solutions. All these directly really help out define what we're talking about when affordable housing comes up. In the agenda packet, we've got a great list out there of projects that have happened in Wheat Ridge. The 19th century economist, Frederick Batiste, would say, those are the seen. They're easy to point out, and they're great examples of what work we've done here. And then there's the unseen, and those are more difficult. Those are the things that really I'm challenging council to focus on out here. Those are the unseen are difficult. The laws, the regulations, the policies, they either can make housing affordable or more unaffordable out there. Zoning restrictions, building codes, occupancy limits, charter density restrictions, growth limits. But similar to the seen, I won't comment if those are, these unseen things might help make it more affordable or less. But what I do ask you tonight, and I'm hoping we can get some consensus at the end of this, and that is my favorite and most passionate affordable housing or housing affordability thing, and that is accessory dwelling units, or ADUs out there. For over a decade, I've stood in front of council here discussing ADUs and the benefits it can have out there. We've had numerous study sessions, community workshops, you name it out there. It comes up in the neighborhood revitalization studies as something that really can bring positivity out here. And it's something that staff too, planning, Lauren and the team, they have this ready to go out here. It just needs your direction out there. You tackled the whole short-term rental thing. That kind of pushed this out in the back the last year or two, along with COVID and a lot of other important things happening. But now is the time to bring this back up, and we can do this now out there. And I really want to bring up, in the spirit of the times and even our discussion on proclamation earlier today, to me it's a big thing. It really sticks to the heart of equity and racial equity. 2 of my units have minority tenants in there, and a vast majority, not vast majority, but it is represented more out there with accessory dwelling units that are obviously affordable, that they are going to be impacting our communities of color and minority communities. And really want to focus, why I'm challenging you now, is there's hundreds of ADUs today that fall outside the legal realm that people don't know if either they can still be there if the city or someone decides to call in or crack down, or, you know, they might even own these units. So it's something, again, you can take care of this today. We can be back here in a month with real ADU regulations out there, and I really want to challenge you towards that out there, Council. Thank you for the time. Thank you for looking at affordable housing and housing affordability, and appreciate everything you've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only person that I have signed up to speak on the study session, but if there's anyone here who hasn't signed up, you may speak on this item now, and I'll go to our clerk and see if anyone on the Zoom format has raised their hand and would like to speak.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will close our public right to speak on the study session. And that will bring us to the first item on our agenda. That is the consent agenda item. Ms. Dozman, would you please introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consent agenda item 1A, a resolution number 42-2021, a resolution authorizing submittal of an application for a 2022 Colorado Parks and Wildlife non-motorized trail grant for Bass Lake Boardwalk improvements. Consent agenda item 1B, resolution number 45-2021, a resolution in support of an application to the Colorado Department of Local Affairs Affordable Housing Strategies Planning Grant Program for Wheat Ridge Housing Strategy and Action Plan.
Okay. Would you read the at issue statements on each of 1A and 1B so we have a little bit more context?
Yes, at issue for item 1A, the Parks and Recreation Department is applying for a Colorado Parks and Wildlife CPW non-motorized trails grant for maintenance work on the boardwalk around Bass Lake. The maintenance work would include addressing uneven surfacing, sinking cross beams, and replacing specific concrete pillars and wooden parallel support beams. A resolution of support is required from City Council to apply for this grant. At issue on item 1B, the Community Development Department is applying for a grant from the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, DOLA, Affordable Housing Strategies Planning Grant Program to complete a City of Wheat Ridge housing strategy. If awarded, the funds would be used for a consultant-supported strategy that includes a housing needs assessment, articulation of city housing policy, and an action plan. DOLA is encouraging a resolution of support from the City Council to be included with the grant application.
Thank you very much. These are, this is part of our consent agenda. Motion is in order, please.
I move to approve consent agenda items 1A and 1B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Mr. Stites. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. On agenda item number 2, Ms. Hulteen, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce resolution number 44-2021, a resolution approving a major subdivision at 5725 and 5785 West 38th Avenue in the mixed-use neighborhood, MUN, Zone District. Case number WS-21-03/Judy Townhomes. At issue, the applicant is requesting approval of a major subdivision on property located at 5725 and 5785 West 38th Avenue. The purpose of the request is to subdivide the property into 26 townhome lots in a total of 4 buildings plus 2 tracts. The plat is required to divide the property, allowing each townhome in the development to be owned separately.
Thank you. This is a public hearing on a resolution of the council. It is quasi-judicial. I'm going to open the public hearing. If you intend to testify on this matter, at this time, your testimony will be deemed to be the truth and the whole truth. So with that, Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation? It looks like we're teed up for one.
We do. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Scott Cutler, a planner in our Community Development Department, is going to
Very
present
good.
this
Mr. Cutler, please continue.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Cutler. I'm a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. This is case number WS-2103, which is a request for approval of a major subdivision located in the mixed-use neighborhood zone district. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the subdivision regulations, and this presentation. The properties within the city of Wheat Ridge, all appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met, and therefore City Council has jurisdiction to hear the case. This is a 2020 aerial view of the property, which is outlined in red. It's about 1¼ acres, and it's located on the north side of 38th Avenue at Eaton Street. 38th Avenue is primarily commercial in this area, including immediately west and south of the site. It has some townhomes to the southeast, and then single-family homes to the east. Residential uses are located to the north along Eaton Street, primarily single-family homes, and the Incarnation development, which includes a mix of housing types, including townhomes, is located a block northwest at the top left of the screen. It's accessed via a pedestrian pathway, which is also an alley that accesses the back of some lots on Eaton Street. Subject site is zoned mixed-use neighborhood, MUN, and as are the vast majority of properties along 30th Avenue. MUN allows residential, commercial, and civic uses. Properties to the north along Eaton Street are zoned R1A, which is a single-family zone district, and then properties to the northwest, including Incarnation, are zoned R3, which allows for a range of residential uses. Subdivision regulations are found in Article 4 of the zoning code. And a plat is a technical document which helps reconfigure lots, tracts, or parcels for sale or development. It removes, creates, or defines property lines, allows the city to evaluate right-of-way, and allows the city to evaluate construction documents. It does not change the zoning nor the permitted uses, and subdivisions do not look at site design or building placement for individual properties. That is handled through the site planning process. The request tonight is to create 26 lots for townhomes. There will be 4 buildings on the site with 4 to 8 homes per building. The plat is required in order to sell the townhomes separately, and all townhomes are required to comply with the MUN development standards. Staff has found a site plan for the townhomes to be approvable, and the townhomes are already permitted by the underlying zoning for the property. The plat will also dedicate 6.5 feet of right-of-way along Eaton Street to make room for public improvements, which will include curb, gutter, and sidewalk. The plat also dedicates access, utility, and drainage easements, which are located in common areas. This is an excerpt of page 2 of the plat document, which is in the staff report. 30th Avenue to the south, Eaton Street to the east, and the pathway to the Incarnation development is on the west. This is a more zoomed-in view of the southern portion of the plat. This includes 22 of the 26 proposed lots and both access points. General building locations are shown in bold. The proposed alleys, which are located in Tract B and have access easements, are shown in gray. Each lot will have direct access to the alley by way of a garage. The alleys also connect to 30th Avenue and Eaton Street, allowing the fire department 2 points of access. The alleys also contain the majority of the utility easements, including the water and sanitation lines. The portion of land being dedicated for the Eaton Street's improvements is shown on the right side in red. Common open space areas are shown in green on this slide. The next slide will show some more open space areas for the northern portion of the site. These areas are located in what's called Tract B, which also includes the alleys and utility easements. Each townhome lot will contain some open space areas, either with patios, stoops, or private yards, but those are not shown on this slide. A 20-foot landscape buffer is located along the north side of this portion of the site to set the homes back from the existing neighborhood to the north. On the west side of the site, there's a pathway from 30th Avenue north to the Incarnation development, which will serve as additional pedestrian access for the development and will be enhanced as part of construction with additional lighting and paving. And the applicant has worked with the Incarnation HOA to this end. This is also used as a vehicular access for some lots north of the site, and that will be maintained. And the city supports the enhancement of this connection as part of the development. This is the northern portion of the plat, which contains 1 building, lots 1 through 4, and it's adjacent to that pathway that I described earlier. There's also an open space area to the north of this portion of the site, which will help act as a buffer between the site and the homes to the north. far as process goes, Wheat Ridge is not a full-service city, so we did send the application on referral to outside agencies, including fire, water, and sanitation, and completed an internal review. There are no remaining comments on this application, and both planning and engineering divisions of the city have found the plat to be approvable. The site plan, which will include the architecture, landscaping, and site design, is also approvable at this time. Construction documents are found approvable, and the construction documents and site plan are not part of the decision this evening. Before the hearing, the property was posted for 15 days. Letters were sent to property owners within a 600-foot radius, and comments collected on Wheat Ridge Speaks will have been reviewed by City Council and entered into the public record. At its hearing on September 2nd, Planning Commission also recommended approval of this request. Ultimately, staff has concluded the request meets the subdivision regulations and all agencies can serve the property. It will allow the development of the site as permitted by the MUN zone district to proceed. For all those reasons, we're recommending approval, and I'd be happy to answer questions. I do know that the applicant has a brief presentation, and we also have a representative from the engineering division on the Zoom call in case there are specific questions for engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to make his presentation now?
There you go. Take off my mask here. Yes, my name is Chris Oxier. I am division president for Story Built here in Denver. Thank you for the opportunity to share a project with you. Just a quick, background on us. We are headquartered in Texas, but we operate in 4 major markets, and individually in those markets, we have different leadership. I lead the Denver market. I've been here for since 2008, and have been working on various projects in the Denver metro area since then. We're vertically integrated. We do our architecture in-house. We have construction in-house as well. That's really about quality control and about our brand and trying to be really creating a high-quality product consistently across markets. Here in Denver, in the Denver metro area, we have 3 projects. This is our first single-family attached project, which is really kind of at our core where we started back in the mid-2000s and late 2000s. And so this is really exciting for us to bring to Wheat Ridge. Just a quick, why did we focus on this corridor? We really like the 38th Avenue corridor. We feel that there is strong demand for housing along this corridor. Certainly from the east, there's been increased pressure on the Sunnyside and the Berkeley neighborhoods. And we've seen increasing demand for high quality new housing along this corridor here as well. We really focus on neighborhood as amenity. Our projects are always focused, or I'd say pretty much always focused in areas where there is a mix of uses, there's walkability, and this site is no exception. We really were attracted to the opportunity to be within blocks from major grocery, within blocks from retail, restaurant uses, parks, et cetera. And so that's part of what we hope to bring is more walking and mixed use home ownership. Quickly we are taking advantage of what was put into effect less than 10 years ago in terms of the mixed use zoning along the West 38th Avenue corridor, which increased density, promoted a mix of uses, and was really trying, at that time appeared to be trying to promote growth along and redevelopment along that corridor, especially between Sheridan and Wadsworth, and that's where we are located. The site does allow us to go to 35 feet. That's pretty much consistent with single family housing as well. The 35-foot height limits seems to be across other zonings as well. And allows us to do 26 units, which is 21 units per acre. That's actually lower density than we might do on a Denver project, or we have seen in Denver. So that gave us an opportunity to introduce different building forms than what you've seen typically happening in the slot homes in Denver. So we really like that. Actually, that's somewhat lower density opportunity. So just looking really closely at the site, again, we are right next to commercial services. There are parks in both directions. We're sort of sandwiched between, to the north is Incarnation, to the southeast is Thrive Parents Row project. There's a strip center to the south, which has several uses, which we think are great in terms of being able to, have yoga and just basic needs and other things there. This is not as high resolution as planning sort of shared, but just to give an idea of kind of what we are doing, with these 4 buildings, is really kind of creating an urban product that faces West 38th, creating a little more of a residential detached garage opportunity with the longer lots that are up here with ground floor living, and providing a 15-foot plus buffer there. I think it's 20 feet actually. And then really embracing this this opportunity for this interior pedestrian and mixed vehicular use walkway. Maintaining the vehicular access, but also making it actually a really nice interior pedestrian experience as well. If you walk down that today and you go towards the north, there's a tree canopy. We're hoping to kind of carry that farther south as well. So that really created an opportunity to kind of have every single lot faces something, as opposed to having facing just a fence or something else on the property line. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to questions from council on this, I would like to invite the public an opportunity to speak on this. So I have a sign-in list here, and the first speaker I have is Matt Philippini, followed by Jennifer Philippini on deck.
Good evening, Council. My name is Matt Philippini, and I am a Wheat Ridge resident living with my wonderful wife at 3905 Eaton Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. I too really like the 38th Avenue corridor, particularly the rare quiet street of Eaton. My wife and I spent 3 years looking for a house in Denver and stumbled upon Eaton about 2.5 years ago, and we're very excited to start our family here. I'm representing my family and the many amazing neighbors who weren't able to make it this evening, most of whom are multi-generational Eaton Street families that have battled the many lawsuits brought on by this development and have lost. We support the development of Wheat Ridge, but would like the Planning Commission to note that this isn't an ideal solution for our neighbors or the community as a whole. My neighbor Susan spoke last session via Zoom and mentioned our initial meeting with the developers about 2 years ago. She mentioned we were originally told there were 12 units and the vehicle access points were solely on 38th Avenue. To learn that the number of units has skyrocketed to 26, we feel like we were lied to by the developers during the initial stages of the planning. What Susan didn't mention was the look on the faces of our fellow neighbors, even when they were told there were 12 units. Tears, shock, and complete loss for words is what I experienced being the newest and youngest neighbor to the street. While zoning may permit this amount of volume and the design, it doesn't mean it's the right thing to approve. Pertaining to the plans, if vehicle access is on Eaton, then it clearly jeopardizes our safety, the safety of our elderly neighbors, and the 10 infants expected by families, including us, over the next 2 to 6 months. We see very little effort in keeping with the beauty of our street through design and landscaping. We'd ask the developers to protect many of the 80 to 100-year-old trees that are in existence on these 2 locations. We'd like the developers to meet with us again, if possible, to hear our fears and requests, to hopefully reduce the volume of units and increase their willingness to step up their landscaping plans and move vehicle access to the development back to 38th. We'd ask the council to install speed bumps, slow signs, and permitted parking for those that live in the single-family homes in existence. My wife is one of those expecting mothers, and based on the current volume of traffic, speeding cars, and many days where cars are blocked by other parked cars, she and I are both terrified of the inevitable increase in traffic and loss of safety. Thank you for your time and consideration in protecting our street, our neighbors, and most importantly, the safety of our children.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Philippini and Karen Case on deck.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Philippini, and I live at 3905 Eaton. My husband is a little better speaker than I am, so we might cover some of the same topics. I, like my neighbors and peers, are grateful for the opportunity to have this forum. I just wanted to state again that we as the Eaton Street community are already feeling misled by the developer. When we originally welcomed the developer into our neighbor's house and he proposed this, the proposal was for 12 units with no entrance exit on Eaton. It is now 26 units. It is now 26 units on Eaton Street with car access. What they told us face to face now seems to have been smoke and mirrors. Now seeing the developer's plans. I think we're all already feeling deceived by what is actually going on in our actual backyards. One of my main concerns is that there is now an exit onto Eaton Street, as Matt also stated. That is giving 26 new homes access to use our short and small street as the most convenient way to head north to get to I-70 and other large commuter streets, turning Eaton Street into a family residential street, into a rush hour and more commuter street. As of now, the child count on Eaton will soon be 10 and growing. We're due in December. We are asking for our concerns to be heard and to help preserve our slow and safe family-friendly street that we've all been invested in. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Karen Case and John Conway on deck.
Thank you. My name is Karen, middle initial K, Case, C as in cat, A-S-E. I live at 6324 DeFrame Way in Arvada. I own the property at 3871 Eaton Street. I lived there for 40 years, raised my children there. It will always be home to me. My property borders the proposed development on both the north and the west. As are the other property owners on Eaton Street, I am very concerned about the density of this development. As some members of the Planning Commission said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. The density will cause enormous problems for this community. Traffic, parking, noise, and especially for me and all the neighbors on the south end of Eaton, privacy. Apparently the balconies of these townhomes will face my property and across towards the street, and the one also the property to the north of me in particular. That makes our yards, others close by and even across the street, totally open to view by those new residents at all times. It also affects the value of all of our properties. After the meeting of the Planning Commission, one other neighbor and I talked with the developer outside the meeting room. When I asked about the balconies and the privacy, he said he didn't know if the balconies faced our properties. Past interested developers have met with the neighbors to discuss the plans for the development. This developer has made no effort to contact the residents of the area. The Planning Commission suggested to them that this would be a good idea. When meeting with them after this meeting, the other neighbor and I suggested a nearby park for a meeting. That never happened. To my knowledge, no resident of the area has ever been contacted. Eaton Street has often been called the oasis of the city. There are lovely, well-kept homes with yards that promote family and neighborly living. We know that the properties in question will be developed. However, I and other residents of the area are opposed to something so dense and intense. This can be redesigned to create a more acceptable use of the property, a plan that fits the nature of the community and respects the wishes and the worries of the people who live there. This neighborhood is asking you to postpone any final decision about this and require that the developer redesign using the many options that can be available. We would like to have input into these new ideas and options. Not only is my personal property at risk, noise, traffic, value, privacy, this is also true for the entire area. Please take these concerns into account and require a more thorough look into these development plans.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Conway.
Good evening. My name's John Conway, C-O-N-W-A-Y. I live at 3901 Eaton Street. I've been a resident of Wheatridge for 44 years, and I've lived at the property at 3901 Eaton for 28 years. I do have some comments I'd like to make. And by the way, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. In polling my neighbors, I found that there were 3 common issues that appeared to be of concern time after time. Number 1, density. Number 2, density. Number 3, density. And of course, the ancillary issues that often dog a major development project like this, namely congestion, traffic, which in this case on Eaton Street in particular, the possibility of inadequate parking, noise, safety, and others. I'm going to borrow a comment from a fellow resident that had posted earlier on the Wheatridge Speaks website. He noted that the parcel of land under consideration currently has 2 single-story, single-family dwellings. If the project goes through as designed, these 2 houses will be replaced by 26 townhomes. Think about that, 26 townhomes, multi-level, multi-story. That's the absolute upper limit of units that's allowed under code. And not only that, it appears that most, if not all of the buildings are at the top limit of the 35-foot height limit. In my opinion, this project is simply too dense. It does not fit into the makeup and the feel of the neighborhood. And for these reasons, I would respectfully request that council cast a no vote for this project as currently configured. And again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Those are all the speakers that I have signed up. If you haven't signed up but wanted to speak on this item, you may do so now. Okay, we will close our public's right to speak on this.
Mayor, excuse me. I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry?
this is Ellie. I do believe we have somebody on Zoom who'd like to speak.
Oh, yes, excuse me. Mr. Clerk, do we have someone on Zoom with their hand raised that we'd like to bring into the meeting?
We do have 2,
Okay.
Todd and Kayla have raised their hand.
Okay, I'm going to have to, I'm going to,
Hartley and Kayla Marangian.
okay, if you would like to invite those individuals to speak by name. I don't have a screen here, so I'm not sure who we're.
Here you go.
Okay. Is this me?
Mr. Hurley, can you hear us now?
Hello.
Okay, we hear you now. If you'd give us your name, please.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, my name is Todd Hartley, and me and my wife have lived in Stewart Gardens for the past 28 years. Everyone that has spoken tonight obviously has our concerns with them. Everything they've said is true. I might be saying things that they've already said, but I want to make something clear, is that besides this property, there's 7 other homes along 38th Avenue that have been changed to multi-use zoning. With this new development, the developer is planning on increasing our population of Stewart Gardens by 50 plus people, 26 new homes, and probably 100 plus cars, new vehicles. That's on the corner of Eaton Street. These 7 other homes that are rezoned will be fallen to other developers. So we're looking at potentially increasing the stretch from Chase to Eaton Street up to and over 200 new people of Stewart Gardens. That's over 100 plus new vehicles of Stewart Gardens. And Obviously, the density is foreseen to be a problem. Not just this development, but the ones that will follow. We did lose a case that was mentioned. Stewart Gardens has always been under restrictions to these developers. We did lose this last case to this property, but the other properties are following also one by one, year by year. We're really concerned about the density. The developer can change. We're always told that we have to change. Our neighborhood has got to be the ones that accept the change. Why can't we have a developer come in and change his plan? He's only proposed one plan. So you as city council members should really visit Stewart Gardens before you make this vote, see what Stewart Gardens is all about, and hopefully you'll come to our conclusions. Again, he's only presented one plan. That's it. And he hasn't talked to anyone in the neighborhood about this plan. He seems to want the maximum he can get. And city council, I believe, can vote no on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkpatrick, do we have additional speakers in the Zoom format?
We do, Mr. Mayor. We had another one whose hand was raised. Oh, there she is. There she is. Kayla, can you hear us?
Yeah, this is actually Jared, Kayla's husband. I'm here with Kayla.
Or would you give us your name and spell your last name and give us your address, please?
Yeah, this is Jared Leidick. That's L-E-I-D as in David, I-C-H. And I live at 3835 Eaton, or sorry, 3880 Eaton Street, just right catty corner to the property we're discussing. Generally, we're in support of development in Wheat Ridge and development on 38th, and we appreciate the developer attempting to answer some of the questions and concerns, but we feel a lot of the answers were insufficient. We appreciate that this is less dense than some parts of Denver, but the disparity in density between this development and the rest of the neighborhood is very large. As already noted, the two houses, which I think are generally representative of the density of the neighborhood, are turning into over 20 properties, which is just a huge difference. And especially given this sort of L-shaped lot where where the property reaches way back into the neighborhood and borders several other properties, it doesn't feel like it meets the intent of the mixed use zoning on 38th, and that a lot of the property isn't really on 38, and one of the streets that is used to access it is also not part of 38. It really doesn't feel to us like it meets the intent of the mixed use zoning, which is intended to be for the busy street 38th. Specifically, we also are wondering how many parking spots there are. We reviewed the zoning code, and we just want to know if the number of parking spots provided are the sort of exact minimum allotted in the zoning code, which I think is 1 per unit. And then sort of in conclusion, because this density is so high compared to the surrounding neighborhoods, we recommend a no vote and that the council revisits the MUN zoning, especially in cases like this one where the lot goes far back into the neighborhood and there's access streets that don't end on 38th, which the mixed use zoning seems to be focused around. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkpatrick, do we have additional speakers in the Zoom format with their hands raised?
No, sir. Do not see any more.
Okay, I will think that now, unless anyone here wishes to speak on this, we will close our public's right to speak, and I will open the floor up to questions from council. Ms. Nosler-Beck?
I had a question from the, for the developers. I'll let you get up here. Could you speak a little bit to the actual floor plans for the homes? Just we're in the midst of really expensive housing prices, and you know, kind of a thematic for tonight has been affordable housing. And so I'm wondering just if you could give an idea of, you know, what the floor plans look like. I know you mentioned that some are townhomes, some are ground level, some are, if you could just.
Sure. So basically the lot size will determine what we can build on that lot. And so there are 15 lots that will accommodate a 2-car garage, and those will have typically 3-bedroom units or 3-bedroom townhomes. Some of those will be end units of the buildings in a 3-story stacked format. Some of those will be in a 2-story format with a detached garage. The others are typically going to be a 1-car garage with a 2-bedroom layout. Sometimes it's more like a 1+10 type layout.
And then are any of them going to be like a ranch style?
No, these are
all of
not
them have
all of
stairs.
The units that will be facing the north on 5725, the east side of the parcel, have the opportunity to be 2-story ground floor living, so ground floor living with an upstairs bedroom, as opposed to being over a garage, which is the more typical townhome format.
Thanks.
If I may also just offer that in terms of meeting with the homeowners, there were several people who had the left parcel under contract before us. And so I believe that there's some some confusion or misunderstanding between who they spoke with, because we did not speak with those people about doing the 12 units. There were 2 other developers who had this under contract over about a year before us, so I just wanted to share that with you, council.
Thank you, Ms. Dozeman, and then Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you. So just along those same lines as to the direction Councilmember Nosler-Beck was going in, what do you anticipate the market rate value being of these townhomes? Like what do you expect those to sell for?
I mean, again, these can go several different directions because this is a plat, not the actual site plan, but we anticipate the home prices being between $550 and $750.
Thank you. Ms. Hulteen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want clarity on, excuse me, whether you've met with the community at all about it or not.
We did not do a general meeting with the community. We did hear from several neighbors at the Planning Commission hearing 2 weeks ago. We do intend to have a follow-up meeting with folks. Have not had one in that time. We did meet with several landowners, some of the larger landowners nearby, including Incarnation, including the commercial owner to the west, and one of the neighbors to the north, but not a general neighborhood meeting.
Okay. And so just to also confirm, so what we're looking at approving tonight isn't, you are bringing forward a proposed plan for 26 units, but we are not actually approving 26 units, right? We are approving lots. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And then just a question about mixed-use neighborhood zoning. If another proposal would come forward on this, would it allow like commercial use like restaurant, bars, anything like that?
Yes, generally speaking, the MUN zoning allows a fairly broad range of commercial uses, office uses, retail, restaurant. Those are all used by right.
And then what can be done to prevent unnecessary use of Eaton Street for traffic coming in and out of the project? If the fire department's requiring or recommending that exit onto Eaton, can it be a directional exit that forces a right turn? What kind of things can be done to help reduce the unnecessary traffic?
And I would note for the clerk's benefit, if we want to get more technical in nature, we do have, I think, Jordan Jeffries, one of our city engineers on the Zoom call as well. So if you want to get more technical, we'll bring him on. But there certainly would be physical ways to limit the turning movements. I don't think that's something that we've deemed to be necessary at this point. I mean, my non-engineer answer would be that most of the traffic wants to go either east or west on 38th Avenue. That if you're wanting to get to some point out there in the Denver metro area, Eaton Street is probably not the most attractive option. We have let the Eaton Street residents know of the neighborhood traffic management program that we have. And that's the council, I'm sure, is very familiar with that. It's a very neighborhood-focused program. So if the residents on Eaton Street all, would want to pursue some sort of traffic mitigation on Eaton Street itself in terms of something like a speed hump or things that you typically see as part of that program, that would certainly be an option. But we haven't felt it necessary to restrict the turning movement from this new local access drive onto Eaton Street at this point.
So just to clarify, will somebody be responding with more technical answers on what we could do? Is that an option? Sorry, I had a hard time hearing you at the beginning, Ken.
Yeah, we can bring Jordan on. He's on the Zoom. And if you want to ask him a more technical question, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think that would be good since that's
Okay.
been a principal concern tonight.
Would you like to ask that question now of the engineer? He's on the Zoom call.
Yeah, I guess we're all getting used to like the not in the room Zoom
Yes,
question.
okay.
So, yeah,
Let's
if we could
let's
do
see if
that,
we
yeah.
can get our clerk to bring on.
Let's make him magically appear, yeah.
He's here, he's on.
All right.
So Jordan, I think the question on the floor is whether that east-west access drive from this development out onto Eaton, whether that turning movement could be somehow physically restricted. Is that an accurate characterization, Ms. Hiltine?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Sure. My name's Jordan Jeffries. I'm in the engineering division. Ken pretty much hit the nail on the head with his response. Anybody wanting to go east, west, or south is probably going to take the access onto 38th. And actually, most people going up to I-70 will actually take the access onto 38th as well, because it's 2 right turns onto Harlan Street. And that's, if I was living there, that's probably the way I'd want to go. But yes, we could restrict that with, we like to call them a pork chop, which is a little concrete median that would physically restrict left turns onto Eaton. We could also look at fire access gates where, it's typically gated off, or there are bollards, and the fire department has the key to that. They aren't too keen on that option. They like to have, good access and not have to get out of their truck and unlock a gate or anything. But as Ken mentioned, we don't anticipate a lot of traffic going up and down Eaton anyway. And we have also informed the residents of the neighborhood traffic management program, which they can contact us and get the ball rolling with installing speed bumps on their street. So that's typically not something we do preemptively. We want to make sure that there's an actual issue with speeding before we would go ahead and force the applicant to install those. So yeah, at this point, we didn't think it was necessary, but there are things you could do to physically restrict access there.
Thank you. Could we actually control the direction within the site so people would have to, and they could enter and exit off of 38th, but they could only exit on Eaton with the single direction right turn?
I'd make, I guess, 2 observations. One, any of these changes, we're really talking about the site plan review, not the subdivision plat, so just need to be a little bit cautious about that. And then second, it is also a fire access requirement, so any of these changes would need to be reviewed and considered and approved by the fire district.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question, so for the site plan, would that be something that would be coming back to council?
No, that's an administrative approval.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think just as we look at this project as a whole, because it is a mixed-use zoning, we are going to see higher density on this lot than we are going to see in the neighborhood. That being the case, it doesn't mean that we necessarily need to compromise here, but I think that we need to understand that the deal that's being presented to us, while it is dense, it is something that I think could work as long as we take into consideration these issues around the access. The thing that I thought about was on 44th and Upham, where the apartments are, there's a fire access for that as well. I don't know if that's kind of a similar setup we could have there that would allow the fire trucks to go through. You know what I'm talking about at 44th and the apartments there? There's some kind of special fire access they have there.
Correct, and that actually, sorry, if you recall correctly, that was initially intended to be a full turning movement access on the
Mm-hmm.
that development, and the problem that came up was that they had some underground detention facilities
Mm-hmm.
location, and the fire district actually increased the size of their tankers,
Mm.
therefore the weight went up to, I want to say 85,000 pounds, and so that underground detention structure couldn't support that weight,
Oh.
and that's why that access was restricted.
Oh, okay. And that was just one idea I had about trying to figure out a way to limit the access on Eaton, because I can appreciate that concern, but as you mentioned, the flow onto Eaton may not be as great as they expect, but I think we need to do what we can to ameliorate that concern. Thank you.
Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Johnstone, I think I may have the year wrong, but it was 2010-ish, the Wheat Ridge voters voted to make exceptions for urban renewal areas and as far as density goes. Is this one of those areas that was exempt, or is this one of those areas that is still, it's still restricted to what the city charter, which is the people's document?
That's correct. Yeah, you're correct in all regards. I think it was 2009, but the vote was aligned, or the ballot question was aligned with urban renewal boundaries. Mostly the I-70 Kipling and Wadsworth corridors were the ones that were, by the voters, exempted from the charter restriction of 35 feet in height and 21 DU per acre. This was not put on the ballot, feeling that this was more of a Main Street density. And though it is an urban renewal, it was not included in the ballot question.
So that's why this project is significantly less dense than, let's say, West End 38th, which was in part of the exemption that was voted on by the citizens of Wheat Ridge.
That's correct. The West End 38 project is the last property kind of in proximity to Wadsworth that was in the other urban renewal area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question for the developer. I am wondering, what do you believe would be the duration of this project from start to finish?
One second, I'm thinking about it. So we reviewed this recently. And then about 18 months. About 18 months of construction, including horizontal work.
That's complete?
That
18
could slow
months?
down depending on sales. So, obviously when you're selling homes, you have to pre-sell a portion of them, and if sales drag, then sometimes the buildings go up slower. If they sold out at the price points that we're proposing, I think they will sell quickly. So we're hoping to move forward fairly efficiently.
Okay, so this isn't considered, is this considered affordable housing?
No, I mean, I have worked in affordable housing, and I would not call it affordable housing. I would call it market rate housing, but we're also not trying to hit, luxury price points either. We're trying to hit the dead center of the market where you're appealing to both, 20-somethings and young 30-somethings as well as 50-somethings. If you were to sort of characterize the buyer pool, it's broad.
And were you planning to think about, there's no area for any yards? They're all kind of
most
together.
townhomes do not have that. We do have an opportunity, as I said, with 8 of those units or 8 of those lots to be able to have a space between a detached garage and the ground floor living, where that would be the primary outdoor space. It actually faces south, et cetera. So that's unique for this type of product of this type of density. And then we have those lots that face the path have the opportunity to have a sort of front porch condition where it's elevated, and then there's, say, 5 feet in front where you can have plantings, and it steps down, and it really creates sort of a pedestrian opportunity within the urban fabric.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stites?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, a question for the developer, sorry. Now, parking's been a question. Is there on-site, I know you said there's garages, there's 15 two-car garages and the rest.
So every unit has a garage, or will have a garage, at least that's our plan. Currently, those would accommodate 15 two-car garages and 11 one-car garages. There is, based on the widths of the lots and what you can build within those. The on-site, the interior drive aisle does have an opportunity for some guest parking, and there is some parking being created along Eaton Street as well with those improvements.
Is that the exact number of spaces required for a development like this, or is that more or less?
We will meet, well, from a market perspective, we believe we're meeting the market, as well as we will certainly meet the requirements for code.
Okay. Is there, I know the residents are concerned about parking, I guess, probably on Eaton and in front of all the houses. Is that something we can take care of too as a city? Is that something we can restrict? Is that?
You're suggesting restricting parking on Eaton?
I'm not necessarily suggesting it, I'm just asking, is that something that we can do if that becomes a problem, or?
We don't really, the only instance under code that we can kind of regulate residential parking, as I understand it, is in relation to school zones. So I don't think we would have a applicable section of code that would suggest that we could further regulate or restrict the parking on Eaton Street, unless there were some sort of a down the road, concern that it was a public safety issue of some sort.
Okay. Can somebody, just to reiterate for everybody who's watching and listening, what are we voting on tonight?
The 26 lot configuration, along with the tract configuration that provides access and utility services to all of those lots. And verifying compliance with the zoning code, which allows up to 21 DU per acre, which this is compliant with. So it's the density of the project and the configuration of the lots and the access and utilities to those lots.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for asking that question, Mr. Stites. Things like trees and balconies, and that's discussed in the site plan, correct?
Yes, all those requirements are codified in the MUN zoning regulations.
So I have a follow-up question that sort of has to do with both, and you can let me know if this is more of a site plan question. But as we're thinking about the size of these lots, one thing that was discussed was mature trees, and what I'm thinking about is so the MUN is dense, and that's on 38. And is there any thought, and I'm not quite understanding if this is in the site plan or if this is in the actual platting that we're talking about now, as far as grading down the density or the ability, because this is a far-reaching into the neighborhood piece that we're taking density pretty far in. And I was just curious if one were to discuss things like tree barriers, fencing, those kinds of things that would shield the rest of the neighborhood from some of that density. Is that something that we can discuss now in the actual lots, or is that all site plan issues?
That's all part of the site plan process. I mean,
Thank you.
As council may recall, all of the mixed-use districts do have some residential setback requirements. So there are some ways that those districts are very much designed to be sensitive to adjacent residential development.
So in speaking to the balcony issue that was brought up, so that would be something that with this site plan that could be discussed, but it's not going to come back to Planning Commission. It'll only
Correct.
be
Yeah,
administrative?
under the MUN or all of the mixed-use zone district series, there's one trigger that generates a more public process, and that's for properties that are either phased or larger than 10 acres, and those
Sure.
are subject to the concept plan review.
Sure.
That's still an administrative process,
Okay.
but it's subject to more public noticing as well, so there is an opportunity for public comment. But otherwise, under the MUN districts, if it's a permitted use by right, it's all subject to administrative review and approval.
Okay.
And that's why the zone districts themselves have very specific development standards and expectations. So
Right.
when the city adopted those mixed-use districts in 2010, 2011, and then initiated the legislative rezonings on 38th and Wadsworth, those were very public processes. There was actually a steering committee of architects and real estate folks and neighborhood folks that participated in the process of developing the mixed-use zoning regulations. And then there were a series of public meetings when the legislative rezonings were initiated along both 38th Avenue and Wadsworth Boulevard. Additionally, there was an opportunity, if you'll recall, for property owners to specifically opt out of that rezoning process, and a handful of folks did. But that kind of is the quick version of the history of how we got to these mixed-use districts.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. And so when this comes back as a site plan for administrative review, things like views from balconies, trees, all of those things will be considered.
Well, I wouldn't say all of those things will be considered. I mean, I think they're entitled to develop under the mixed use. So to the extent that you can have a balcony on a second floor or even, off of a third floor, if it's within the requirements of the zoning in terms of height, that's permissible. So I don't want to over-promise as to what that site plan process will result in. I think, as Scott mentioned in his presentation, we've actually reviewed the site plan, and it's either what we call approvable or very close to that point.
All right.
So it informed the plating process, certainly.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to remind everybody that this is a subdivision plat review. It's not to review specific site plan or architectural details. It's to confirm that the appropriate lot configuration, access, right-of-way easements, utilities, and all the sites are done to make it developable parcels of land for a land that is already a permitted use. So it's a use by right, and we utilize our zoning codes and regulations and to make sure that this technical document complies with Article 4 of Chapter 26 of our city code. Along with that, it also complies with our city charter, and the city charter is the people's document, and it is what we have been elected to uphold, is the city charter. So I just would like everybody to keep that in mind because we seem to be getting very far off track.
Thank you, Ms. Dozeman.
So I have a question, but before I ask that of staff, because I'm not sure whether you'll have an answer, I do want to say that although the purpose of this request is to talk about plats and lots, if we do not subdivide the property, the use by right would not be able to be allowed with the current configuration. On that note, I did want to ask if staff has any background information about the deed restriction within this neighborhood. It was mentioned a couple times, and I happen to know about it just because of some of the people that I know in Wheat Ridge. So I don't know if anybody else has more information on that.
I'm probably not in a great position to respond to that. I mean, I'm aware that there's a historic deed restriction that limited certain land uses on this property and the surrounding properties in the subdivision, and there's been some litigation surrounding that. And beyond that, I would be probably going too far in terms of my understanding of where that's gone and where it hasn't gone. Scott, I don't know if you'd want to add anything additional to that or not.
Just a couple more things on that. Ken's absolutely correct. That's also not something that the city was directly involved in. It was between private parties. And I know that, like, at least for this property, I don't believe it was this particular developer. This actually occurred previously before this group got involved. And it does apply to all of the properties within the Stewart Gardens subdivision, irrespective of the zoning of the property. So the city actually just looks at the zoning, which is zone mixed use.
Ms. Dozeman?
Just to follow up, I don't know if you have any information as to like what that deed restriction is of the uses. So we don't have any information on record with the city.
We're not a party to the deed restriction. It's a encumbrance on the lots, and the beneficiaries of those rights and burdens, if I'm using the right terminology there, are the owners of property within the subdivision. So the city has no jurisdiction in regards to it, so we really haven't, been involved in those discussions in any significant way.
And could you maybe explain kind of how a deed restriction of that nature would have come to be? Would that have been like the neighborhood?
It's very common that the deed restrictions would be recorded against a subdivision of property, but on a parallel track to the city's review and approval of the subdivision itself. So there's often covenants or restrictions that are imposed on, particularly it's most common in single-family residential subdivisions, very much a common practice that would limit what you can and can't do on the property, whether restrict your ability to have an RV on your property or to have a certain type of shed. I mean, they're very common, but they're typically not something that the city is involved in enforcing. We could, but that hasn't been our practice. We often review covenants and restrictions as part of a subdivision process to make sure they're not in any way inconsistent with the zoning on the property or that we see conflicts there, but they're typically more restrictive, and it's a developer or a subdivider choosing to place those encumbrances on the property for what they believe to be the best utilization of the property moving forward.
So why was that not reviewed by the city? Like how did that not come into play?
Well, the subdivision was approved, I'm not even sure when Stewart Gardens was approved, but many decades ago.
I think it was 1922 or something like that, so way before the city of Wheat Ridge. And then, of course, there were things in there, the covenants that potentially could be in conflict with current city codes.
Thank you. That helps.
Ms. Hulteen?
Thank you. In respect to Councilwoman Hoppy's comments, I realize I'm kind of going to walk a fine line here, but since I believe in use by right, and the density that comes with this project is the what it's zoned for. I feel as the District 2 representative and having met long before this project with the residents of Eaton who've had concern about this site, we won't see that site development plan. That'll go through administratively. And so I'm just sort of trying to sniff around what are things that we can do tonight to address some of the concerns that come up. And I realize most of them are site plans. Can we put conditions on the approval of this?
That would depend on the nature of the conditions, I would suppose. I would lean on Jerry to opine on a condition that you were imposing.
Your guiding rule when you're looking at subdivision, where the scope of your review is very narrow, as I think you can appreciate and you've heard here tonight, is does it comply with the subdivision regulations? And that's the sort of guidepost. So any conditions that would be applied would have to be conditions that are designed to ensure compliance with the subdivision regulations. That stops short of design conditions that would make the project more appealing, easier on the neighbors. Things like that aren't standards in the subdivision regulations, which are the lots, this kind of setback has to, this sort of access, utility provision, et cetera. So that's pretty limited. My suggestion would be you could certainly, ask, is this category supportive of making the project compliant with the subdivision regulations, in which case, fine, that category would be okay for a condition. Categories that, or conditions that do great things but aren't supportive of making the project comply with the regulations would not be available. So your guidepost is really the regulations. Do they address this topic or not? If they address the topic, then yes, a condition. If they don't, then no.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have additional questions of the applicant or the staff before I close the public hearing and ask for a motion? I'm going to close the public hearing, and Ms. Hulteen, may I have a motion on agenda item number 2?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve resolution number 44, 2021, a resolution approving a major subdivision at 5725 and 5785 West 38th Avenue in the mixed-use neighborhood MUN zone district for the following reasons. City Council has conducted a proper public hearing that meets all public notice requirements as required by Section 26109 and 26407 of the Code of Laws. The requested subdivision has been reviewed by the Planning Commission, which has forwarded its recommendation of approval. The subdivision plat has been found in compliance with Article 4 of Chapter 26 of the Code of Laws. All agencies can provide services to the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense, and with the following conditions. The applicant shall pay the required fees in lieu of parkland dedication at time of building permit. The developer shall enter into a subdivision improvement agreement and a lot sale restriction covenant agreement with the city at the time of recordation of the subdivision plat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Ms. Hoppy. Is there discussion on the motion? Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I understand a lot of people's concerns about the traffic, there were 2 projects that I'd like to bring your attention to that happened on 38th Avenue that there were a lot of concerns about the traffic. West End 38th, which is an apartment complex. And the concern was that that is right where 38th Avenue expands and contracts from 1 to 2 lanes on that side. And I live in that area, and I can say that the traffic, which I thought was going to be considerably noticeable, was not very, very noticeable. And then also with the Perrins Row right down the road, again, that's right where the lanes expand and contract, and everybody was concerned about the traffic. And I drive in that area often, and the traffic was not considerably noticeable change again, because oftentimes people are utilizing 38th Avenue to get in and out of there. So with the traffic, my hope is that you won't have to put speed bumps on your street through the neighborhood traffic management program. However, there is the option to be able to do that. And then also, for us to be able to build a strong and diverse community, we need strong and diverse housing. And so townhouses create a move-up market, and we need to create a move-up market in our community, which is why I support these types of projects, to be able to bring in both the financial diversity and our citizen diversity in our community.
Additional discussion, Ms. Dozman and then Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of concerns about this project, namely that the developer has not met with the community. Also that this is, although I understand that we are voting on a subdivision configuration, if that were not to be put through by council, then this project would not be able to move forward. And the fact that if we were to vote for this subdivision, that it would administratively be pushed through without any guidance, even though there would be public comment, we would not have any teeth as to what that would look like, or any kind of traffic calming techniques. And because I'm running for re-election and walking and talking to neighbors, although I'm unopposed, I hear all over the community, including members that have recently moved to Wheat Ridge, that they are most concerned about density. I agree with Ms. Hoppy that townhouses are a diverse kind of housing that would attract a different sort of family, and I've supported other projects like this in Wheat Ridge, including in my own district. But having met with some of those residents in those areas, they did have very valid concerns about traffic, including with the Incarnation development in District 2, which is right down the street from my parents' house, and actually put an access through to Reed Street, and one of my really good friends lives there, and it does affect not only parking but traffic on Reed Street, which used to be a dead end. I hear our community saying they're concerned about policing, and the ability for our police department to police a larger, dense city, and that they really would like to see the dust settle as far as some of the developments that are already in place. We have development going in at 38th and Wadsworth, the 38th and Upham project. We also have many apartments going into the Clear Creek Crossing, and that is a whole new development that we are going to have to take into consideration on how we are going to police. We have the Lutheran project coming up and currently under public input. And so I have a lot more concern with this project than answers. And at this time, because I'm walking and talking and listening to residents and their issues with the density, I'd really like to just pump the brakes, and I'd love to see the developer meet with the community and hear their concerns prior to me supporting a subdivision. Thank you.
Ms. Hulteen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a tough one. I am a strong believer at the end of the day in use by right, and that's something that as individual property owners in the city of Wheat Ridge that we expect for ourselves, that we have a certain governance and guidance on our property, that should that change, that we have a voice in the change of it, but that the condition exists. And I'm also a huge believer in Wheat Ridge bringing the best and to expect high quality investments and developments in our community. And I think Storybuilt actually is a high quality developer. I spent quite a bit of time reviewing projects that they've done and some of their other proposed projects. You know, it's easy to want the density to be different, and as long as this is zoned for this density, it's going to be really hard to get a developer that's going to come in with anything significantly less. You may shave it off by a unit or two, but at the end of the day, the density that this project is currently zoned for is going to be something pretty close to what's being presented tonight. If this were not on 38th Avenue, I would have very, very, very different feelings about this. I would not be in support of it. If this was embedded in a neighborhood, to me, this is not in line with the quality of life, especially on Stewart Gardens. It is a charming gem of a street, and I agree you should go visit it if you haven't already. It's got some really unique housing in our community. But this is along 38th Avenue. It is zoned for mixed use neighborhood. And if this developer went away, you know, it could be something worse that comes up next. And I think that's the thing we always have to remember. It's easy when we're thinking about what's possible when we're not the ones who's actually making it happen, is we can idealize what those situations are. Because we are not looking at a rezoning or reconfiguration of the lot, and we're looking at use by right, I think the developer has been thoughtful in terms of trying to create some setbacks along the neighbors. They could have configured the lot differently. And while I would like to see lower density, and I would very much like to see thoughtful consideration to how traffic impacts Eaton, that's my biggest concern from this, is the increased traffic. We unfortunately, because of the development site plan, we don't have that jurisdiction as council. So I would not support this if it was a rezoning. I would not support this if this was embedded within a neighborhood, but it is within its existing zoning. It's on our main street that we are trying to revitalize, and it's a main corridor that already supports quite a bit of traffic. And, you know, I've looked at this lot for a long time. It was, concerns about it were brought to my attention while I was running. And it is problematic because it does penetrate into the neighborhood. And I wish there was a better solution. I actually sat down with Lauren before any proposals were forward that I knew of to brainstorm of creative ways to circumvent how this particular lot penetrates the neighborhood. And unfortunately for this lot, our height and density restrictions within the charter actually made some of the more creative solutions to this lot something that we wouldn't be able to pull off. So I will be supporting this. I agree with Leah that the only thing that would make me not support it would be if the developer doesn't meet with the community. really need the developer to be in good relationship with the neighbors in this location. And so I heard an expression from the developer that they intend to have that meeting. I expect them to have that meeting. I expect them to develop good relationships. They're good people on that block. A lot of them have lived there a long time, and want good things for the city, but also really want to be mindful of maintaining the character of Eaton. And I really, since you're in-house on your construction, I expect your construction crew to be respectful of the neighbor and to also not travel on Eaton Street. So I'd like to see those things moving forward. But again, this is use by right. And with that, I think we're bringing quality developer to the city, and I will be supporting this.
Further discussion on the motion? Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have heard over and over from people, residents who've lived here for not that long, but also longer, why they moved to Wheat Ridge. The thing about moving to Wheat Ridge is they like how it is. We're turning into Highlands. I understand about the zoning. I understand that. But what I also understand is listening to the residents. They don't want the density. They don't like the tall buildings that look down on the single-story houses. There is the traffic. There is noise. So I know there's money in it for developers, and you can make a lot of money on 26 townhomes and things. But I support the people who have lived here and why they live here. We're supposed to be the kind of rural area, but we're not going that way. So I know we have the zoning types of things, but I support the residents and what they are saying when they write in Wheat Ridge Speaks or they come here, and the traffic, yeah, there's going to be traffic. So I am not voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional discussion on the motion? Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm agreeing with both sides on this, you know, like you should, I guess, as a politician. But, you know, I was born and raised here in Wheat Ridge, and one of the reasons I'm not a lifelong Wheat Ridge resident is because when I was 20, early 20s, I wanted to buy a townhome with my wife, and Wheat Ridge had, the only townhomes we had, you probably had to put $100,000 into renovating just to be able to live there. So diversifying Wheat Ridge's housing market, I think, is something that's really important. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I do have concern that this developer hasn't met with the neighbors at all, and I do hope that that's something that they move forward with. If this was a rezoning, my vote would be no. The reason that I'm voting yes on this is because this is a use by right, and that's important. I think that if it was, and again, as Ms. Holteen said, if this was deeper into the neighborhood, if this was in the middle of Eaton instead of on 38th Avenue, my vote would also be no. But I don't think this is a discussion we would be having in the middle of Eaton property. I think the reason we're having this discussion is because it's on 38th Avenue, and that's designated for a little bit more high density and not in the middle of a neighborhood. So that's a corridor as defined by all of our plans. So that's important to look at as well. So I will be voting yes on this, but I'm with Ms. Holteen. For this developer to continue to have a relationship with the city of Wheat Ridge, they need to do a better job engaging their neighbors. So thank you.
Additional discussion on the motion? Ms. Holteen?
Thank you. I know I talked for a long time, but I just want to make one additional comment. You know, a similar project to this is in District 2, sort of embedded more within the neighborhood. It's the Thrive Builders project on Yarrow, just south of 44th. And I can't remember, it's like 89 townhomes. Does that sound right? Smart people over there? Okay. And that, I walk my dogs by there pretty much every day, and I've been watching that project go up over time. And at the time, it was kind of a mind-blowing density. And I was a little stricken as a neighbor of that project. Seeing the Carnation greenhouses go away that are part of our core identity as a community, I will confess up here, I cried. It really made me sad, because that's part of Wheat Ridge's history. I will say, as the project's gone up and people are moving in, they are selling like hotcakes. I believe they may even almost be sold out. And they are bringing people to the community, like a diversity of people living there. We've got empty nesters, there's families, and I have not heard any complaints. There was one person who's complained about parking, and it was something the city was able to respond to quickly. And other than that, and then that's not on the corridor, that is embedded within a neighborhood. So I think it's really easy before this comes in to have a lot of anxiety, and I'm certainly sensitive to the people tonight who this is literally abutting to their property. That is, I'm not going to downplay, that is going to have an impact on your experience living in your house, but it's the zoning of the property. And one of the comments online was about not being friendly to the people who move into a project like this, and I just hope we can be friendly as a city, because people who buy into these are not the people who are the developers. They are going to become our neighbors. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed by a vote of 5-3, with Ms. Nasser-Beck, Ms. Dozman, and Ms. Hutchinson voting no.
Thank you. That will conclude item number 2. We will go now to item number 3. Mr. Stites, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill number 14-2021, an ordinance approving an intergovernmental agreement with Wheat Ridge Urban Renewal Authority, and in conjunction therewith approving the conveyance of real property to and from the city. At issue, the Wheat Ridge Urban Renewal Authority, DBA Renewal Wheat Ridge, RWR, owns property located at 7690 West 38th Avenue, which has been under active environmental remediation since 2013. The Colorado legislature passed Senate Bill 14-073, which provides a state income tax credit for environmental remediation for contaminated land. State law requires the city both pay for remediation and own the land for eligible or to be eligible for the tax credits. The city has, on an annual basis, provided funding to RWR to pay for the environmental remediation of the property. This ordinance will convey the property to the city in order to obtain the tax credit certificate, and then convey the property back to RWR once the tax credits are secured, so that RWR can sell the property to the Wheat Ridge Corners development for future development.
This is an ordinance on second reading. It is a public hearing. It is not quasi-judicial. I'm going to open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, do we have a further staff report on this?
Just real briefly, the issue statement was pretty straightforward, I think, but there's a lot of history to this project, and Steve Art, our Economic Development Manager, is on Zoom also to answer any questions if you have any, but Mr. Dahl and our Wheat Ridge Urban Renewal Authority attorney, Corey Hoffman, have been working on this issue and working with the state and the State Attorney General's office to ensure that we can get these tax credits. And just a little bit of history on this, and what might be of interest to you is this bill, Senate Bill 14073, was sponsored by Sherry Jean, Senator Sherry Jean, who's a Wheat Ridge resident many years ago, and actually Governor Hickenlooper at the time actually came to Wheat Ridge to sign this bill on this property that we're talking about, 38th and Wadsworth. Unfortunately, the legislation, I talked to Ms. Jean recently, and the legislation, there was an oversight that did not reference urban renewal authorities as eligible entities, which Mr. Dahl can speak to here a little bit more. So that's what this is all about. It's kind of a workaround the system so that the city and the urban renewal authority can still take advantage of this bill that was passed specifically for this type of project. And that's what we see here tonight. Mr. Dahl.
Thank you. And as Patrick mentioned, it may well be that we'll see a mandatory in legislation to make clear that urban renewal authorities can receive these tax cutters directly. But in this particular case, the history had already taken place. The remediation had already taken place. And the city, while the city had funneled money to Renewal Wheat Ridge for that, the city was not a property owner. And in order, as was mentioned, to be able to acquire the tax credit, the city has to both own the property and be the one that paid for the remediation. And so the workaround that we sat down, Corey Hoffman and I, the attorney for Renewal Authority, and I sat down on the phone with the person in the Attorney General's office, and we thought carefully about how can we structure it so the city is actually the property owner. And we structured this, the city takes title, acquires the tax credits, then immediately conveys title. Or immediately, it'll probably be within really days or weeks, but a very short time frame that the city's the owner of the property. So we're really facilitating that process by the city coming into ownership. And there's no question it's a workaround, but it's something we were very, very, I think it's important to say, transparent with the state on. This is not something where we wanted to hide from them that the city hadn't owned the property in the past, but nevertheless, here's what the city has done, here's how it's contributed, here's why we're doing this. Is that all right with you? And we laid that whole pattern out for the Attorney General's office, and they agreed. That's why you'll notice that the recitals that kind of tell the story of this are as lengthy as they are, so that we wanted to, pardon me, continue to be really transparent about it. But this is a system that they say does work. We'll make the tax credits available, and we'll provide a considerable amount of money to really help support this project when it's marketed back and built. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the clerk to clear the voting board. Thank you. And then I want to invite the public to speak on this item number 3. I do not have anyone signed on my list for this item to speak, but I want to invite anyone that is here and has not signed the list to be able to speak, and you may do so now by coming to the podium. And I want to have the clerk ask all of our folks on Zoom if there's anyone who would like to speak on this item to raise their hand, and we will bring them into the meeting and let them speak. So is there anyone here that would like to speak, or anyone on the Zoom with their hands raised that would like to speak?
I see no one online, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will close that public's right to speak portion of this item, and I will go to questions from council. Are there any questions that we have before I close the public hearing? Then I'm going to close the public hearing, and Mr. Stites, a motion is in order.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Council Bill number 14-2021, an ordinance approving the intergovernmental agreement with the Wheat Ridge Urban Renewal Authority, and in conjunction therewith, approving the conveyance of real property to and from the city on second reading, and it take effect upon approval by Renewal Wheat Ridge of the intergovernmental agreement, but in no event later than November 20th, 2021, as permitted by Section 5-11 of the Charter.
Second.
There is a motion and a second by Mr. Urban. Is there a discussion on the motion? Ms. Hoppy?
I just want to say I'm glad that we were able to figure out this process to do this for the Urban Renewal Authority. And it'll be nice for us to finally see something happening with that piece of dirt on that corner that's been sitting there. They took the fences down, so now we get to just, instead of looking at ugly fences, look at the ugly dirt. So someone please come build something there. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you. We will move now to agenda item number 4. Ms. Weaver, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Council Bill number 16-2021, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding outdoor recreational equipment on private property. This is case number ZOA-21-02. At issue, the zoning code in Chapter 26 of the Code of Laws includes very few regulations related to outdoor recreational equipment. The City Council has determined that it is appropriate to amend the code to limit the size of private recreational equipment, particularly those which are permanent in nature. The purpose of this amendment is to allow for reasonable, common-sense enjoyment of recreational equipment in residential yards. Mr. Mayor, would you like me to read the prior action?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
This is an ordinance on first reading to set the date, time, and location for a public hearing A motion is in order. Ms. Weaver.
I move to approve Council Bill number 16-2021, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding outdoor equipment, recreational equipment on private property on first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, September 27th, 2021 at 7 p.m. as a virtual meeting and in the City Council chambers, if allowed to meet in person on that date per COVID-19 restrictions, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second. We have a second by Mr. Stites. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We will now move to agenda item number 5. Ms. Nosler-Beck, would you please introduce this item?
Thanks, Mayor. Council Bill number 15-2021, an ordinance revising compensation for the mayor, council members, and mayor pro tem. At issue, as a part of the 2022 budget process, staff conducted a survey of other Colorado municipalities concerning the compensation for mayors and council members. Survey results indicated Wheat Ridge compensation is significantly lower than neighboring communities. This ordinance increases compensation for the mayor, council members, and mayor pro tem, and requires that this compensation is reviewed every 6 years by council.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on first reading to set the date, time, and location for a public hearing. Ms. Nosler-Beck, a motion is in order.
I move to approve Council Bill number 15-2021, an ordinance revising compensation for the mayor, council members, and mayor pro tem on first reading. Order it published. Public hearing set for Monday, September 27th, 2021 at 7 p.m. as a virtual meeting and in City Council chambers, 7500 West 29th Avenue. If allowed to meet in person on that date per COVID-19 restrictions, and that it take effect upon adoption.
Is there
Second.
a
Second.
Second by Mr. Urban. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We will move to agenda item number 6. Mr. Urban, would you please introduce this item? Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, I just have a question about that. Am I able to ask?
I'll
something
entertain a
about that?
question if you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, about this, what we just voted on. Okay. I just want to say I do support the raises, okay? 20 years without a raise is kind of a long time, and even longer for the mayor. And I don't know where council's been. But anyway, my question is, with the upcoming election, we have 4 out of 5 people running unopposed. So I am just wondering, I know you can't vote for this when you are, in office. You can't do anything about your own raise or anything. But I'm just wondering, with the people who are unopposed and running, is this ethical for, they already know they're going to win. So they kind of are,
Well, there can always be write-in candidates, so nothing is certain. And we're going to have a public hearing on this whatever the date of the public hearing was. So we're going to have an opportunity to talk about this again in detail. Okay, Mr. Urban, agenda item number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution 43-2021, a resolution authorizing submittal of an application to the Jefferson County Open Space Land Conservation Partnership Program for funding to support the acquisition of 4100 Gray Street, and in connection therewith approving the acquisition by the city of real property for the addition to Randall Park. At issue, the Parks and Recreation Department would like to acquire and conserve the 4100 Gray Street residential lot, which is adjacent to the southwest corner of Randall Park. The current owner has contacted the city about its availability and given the city the option to purchase the property for market value. Should the city purchase the 0.16 acre lot, the property, the 1,110 square foot circa 1951 house would be demolished and the property would become part of Randall Park.
Thank you. This will be a resolution of the council. Mr. Goff, we have an additional presentation
We
on
do this evening. There's a lot of history to this, this site also. So Karen O'Donnell, our Parks and Rec Director, is going to give just a few slides, just so you have some context. And there's some timing issues behind this because of the property owner's desire to sell fairly quickly. So we wanted to get this in front of you and get some further direction this evening.
Okay, well, Ms. O'Donnell, please give us a brief presentation.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Mayor and members of council, for giving me this opportunity to share this information with you and answer any questions that you might have. So, as mentioned, this is the property at 4100 Gray Street, and the purpose for this discussion is really to support the application to the Jefferson County Open Space Land Conservation Partnership Program, but also the approval of the property acquisition at 4100 Gray Street to increase the footprint of Randall Park. So I just wanted to include that map for reference, which is also in your packet, but it really just shows that the southwest corner of Randall Park, the property is located in that corner, and that's the only piece of this city block that is not part of Randall Park, and I've just listed the amenities of that park on this slide. And as mentioned, the current property owner did reach out and wanted to start with the city to see if we'd be interested in purchasing this before he went to any realtor or anything like that, because he certainly sees the value in making this park space as well. And we do have an appraisal scheduled for tomorrow, so we'll be able to assess the market value of this property. So also in your packet is just the information on the Jefferson County Open Space Land Conservation Partnership Program. And with that, if you look in those green boxes, it shows that they'll fund up to 25% of a local project and up to 50% of what's considered a regional project. This park itself is considered a local project, so they'll fund up to 25%. So we'll be requesting $150,000 in our application. And their staff have been really supportive as we've talked through this acquisition with them. Obviously, this would have to go to the Jefferson County Open Space Board and then the Board of County Commissioners for ultimate approval. So just why we would want to acquire the property: it's the only property, as mentioned, on the city block that isn't currently part of Randall Park. The opportunity may never arise again, or it could be a few years, it could be never. It did come up, as Patrick mentioned, I believe in 2013, and I'm not entirely certain why it didn't move forward at that time, but here we are again with this incredible opportunity, and we talked in our last meeting with the Parks and Recreation Commission about this project, and they unanimously agreed that the city should seek ownership of this property. And our staff recommendation would be to expand the community garden to East Wheat Ridge for reasons of just equity. When we talk about food security in the Wheat Ridge community, that's an important issue. And because we have this really successful Regenerate Wheat Ridge program that we've found that our community is really excited about and gotten behind. So really to expand those opportunities throughout the community. However, we would seek community input and make sure that this is something that the neighbors in that area would be interested in. And just briefly, again, it's in your packet, but the financial impact, our estimated property cost is $535,000 to $540,000 for the home. And then we also are looking at just miscellaneous costs of appraisal and closing costs and things like that, plus the demolition. That would bring that total estimate to about $560,000. And again, we'd be eligible for $150,000 from the Jefferson County Open Space Grant. And therefore, if we're successful, it would cost around $410,000 for the city. And we do believe that we have that money within our current open space fund and can make that happen this year. So if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to questions from council, I'd like to open this up to the public. If anyone would like to speak on this, I do not have anyone signed up to speak on agenda item number 6, but anyone here who is not signed up is welcome to come to the podium and speak on this, and I'll ask the clerk to check our Zoom format and see if anyone has raised their hands to speak on this issue, and he's indicating that we do not. We do not have anyone in the hall to speak, so we will close our public's right to speak on this issue and go to questions from council. Ms. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just great. I have no question. I'm super excited about this. And I think it's a great opportunity, and I love the idea of course, with community input, considering a community garden on that space.
Any further discussion or any further questions before I ask for a vote? Okay, Mr. Urban, may I have a motion on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Resolution 43-2021, a resolution authorizing submittal of an application to the Jefferson County Open Space Land Conservation Partnership Program for funding to support the acquisition of 4100 Gray Street, and in connection therewith approving the acquisition by the city of real property for the addition to Randall Park.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Ms. Hulteen. Is there discussion on the motion? Ms. Hulteen.
I just echo Councilmember Weaver's enthusiasm for this. I think is a great location if there's community support for expanding our community garden program. And I would just encourage, as we're thinking about that, to really look into some of the best practices around equitable community gardening. I think we have an opportunity here to really engage and reach some of our community members who may not be aware of Happiness Gardens. It's a much more visible site. There's a lot of community members who use that site for the pavilion and the different sporting events there. So I think it's really a chance for us to take what Regenerate Wheat Ridge has started and really expand it around community awareness, but really engaging some people who might not otherwise have access to community gardens. So good luck. I guess I did have a question, if I can go back to questions. What is the timing for this, since the owners got some expediency from their end in terms of the review by the open space, the various agencies who are looking at it? Are we feeling good about our timing on this?
Yes, I think we've talked with the open space staff, and they've laid out the schedule. I don't unfortunately have it in front of me, but that we can meet the deadlines that the homeowner's looking at. So, and we can make that happen within this year.
Okay, great. Well, let's get happier with more gardens. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
The motion passes unanimously, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That concludes the agenda items that we have. I would like to recognize our Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like council to consider rescheduling our study session. This study session will be about an hour and a half, potentially 2-hour discussion. The presentation's about 45 minutes. And it's an important topic that I would hate to rush through. And with it being the time of the night, and also because of I know what the scheduling is coming up. I know that we have room in the schedule for it to come up soon. And so I would just like to maybe ask for if there's any concern against rescheduling it, and ask for a consensus to reschedule it.
I think we need more than a consensus
Do
to
we need
cancel
more?
the meeting.
Sure, consensus to direct the
Postpone.
Mayor Pro Tem to reschedule the study session.
So do we have consensus to reschedule the study session? Oh, looks like a pretty popular motion. Okay. We'll plan to reschedule our...
Susan actually suggested rescheduling, so, and she's available in the future, she said so.
Okay, and it would be nice if we could have her here in person
yeah.
also.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. We will now go to our city manager's matters.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, you all received your proposed 2022 budget last Friday, and thank staff, Allie, and especially, and the staff that worked on that. We have a study session coming up next week, right? September 20th. So encourage the public to come out. If they have any questions, they want to see the presentation on the 20th, they can ask questions and continue providing comments and responses in our What's Up Wheat Ridge website. And then adoption is scheduled for October 11th, and that will be an official public hearing that's required by law. So public is, again, invited for that and can ask questions and provide comment then. So if council has any questions, please reach out to us beforehand. You don't have to wait to the study session. I'm sure you read it all over the weekend already. And we'd be happy to meet with you one-on-one or take a phone call or email if you have any questions. So that's it. Thank you.
Actually, I'd start to reread sections of it. Reread sections, yes. City Attorney's Matters, Mr. Dahl.
Nothing tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, very brief there. Thank you. We'll go to Elected Officials Matters and start with our clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing this evening.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilwoman Nosler-Beck.
Nothing this evening.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hutchinson.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Councilwoman Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to give a shout out to Local Works. I volunteered at the Criterium yesterday evening. It was a great event. I saw a lot of local neighbors and actually I was checking IDs for wristbands. And so, you're looking at licenses, and a majority of the people that I was checking in were either from Wheat Ridge or recently moved to Colorado. So it was a great event. And then we also have our TLC Cleanup Day coming up this Saturday, September 18th. It's at from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And this one, where's the location of this one? At St. James Episcopal Church? Okay. Maybe Councilmember Hulteen will have more details on that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope everybody was of age when you checked their wristbands, so, good. Councilman Urban.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hulteen.
Surprise, there's a TLC cleanup at St. James Episcopal Church this Saturday morning. It's in my neighborhood. Last time I went, somebody had thrown away all of their lawn ornaments from Christmas were in the dumpster, and some of them were religious in nature, and it was a little unsettling to see these religious figurines in the dumpster. So don't tempt fate. Get rid of things that are going to keep you in good standing. I also volunteered at the Criterium. It was my first time ever. I had so much fun, and like Councilmember Dozeman mentioned, I was not checking IDs. I was embedded in a dangerous turn inside the neighborhood. And what I witnessed was not just a lot of really fast people on bikes speeding by, but I saw neighbors out literally pulling out their recliners and their couches and kids playing. And it was one of the most like community building events I've seen in Wheat Ridge in a long time. And there were some grumpy neighbors who don't like getting their streets closed, but for the most part, what I saw was the best that Wheat Ridge has to offer. And it's a great event, and I'm really proud that that's in our city. I am going to be hosting a District 2 meeting, District 2 on October 2 at 10 o'clock. I'm still working on the location, and we'll get the word out on that, but we'll be meeting with District 2 folks to talk about the upcoming Wadsworth project and anything else of interest on their minds. So I will get that out, but 10 o'clock on October 2nd, location to be determined. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some kind of sad news. A former council member, Harry Hanley, passed this last week. So I don't know if you know him, but our condolences, my condolences go out to his wife and family. I don't know if Mr. Groff wanted to say anything more, but
No, thank you for mentioning that. We failed to get an email out on that, but we will. I believe the Gazette is going to be doing a story on him and his history with Wheat Ridge. So,
thank you. Councilmember Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Weaver and I and Mr. Goff had a fantastic event about 2 weeks ago over by Louise Turner Park. We filled 3 dumpsters. By the time the event started at 9 o'clock, we had already filled half of a dumpster, and then we filled up two more coming through the rest of the day. We had a fantastic meeting. I think we had about 25 people there. We've already started on working on a bunch of stuff for them. I was also at the Criterium yesterday. Personal Achievement Martial Arts had the kids zone that we were running yesterday, so we had a blast. Got to meet a lot of new families and a lot of older families that have lived here, but a lot of new families moving to Wheat Ridge. I also want to thank my neighbor Guy Namiash, who puts on art at the farm every couple of weeks. I was able to go to that a couple weeks ago, and it was phenomenal as usual. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hoppe.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that brings us about to the end of our meeting tonight. I would like to thank the folks that showed up on the Saturday for Coffee with the Mayor. We had some great discussions. I want to thank Chief Murtha for joining us and really telling us a lot about his relationship policing program that he's developing. I spent Sunday over at the Criterium. We had a great time. It's really I'm just so pleasantly surprised, or I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but delighted when I get to events that we have in our city, and to see the enthusiasm and the participation and the range of ages and sort of the attitude of people having fun together in their community. We've got a great thing going. So we will be back next week in a study session right here at 6:30. So in the meantime, please drive carefully. School is in session. We've got hopefully kids playing after school outside, so watch them and be safe and take care of one another. So with that, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.